Turnups, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Turnup. This is very unprecedented of us to do two episodes in the same day, but what we saw at the White House today with Trump, with Zelensky, with JD Vance is shaking up the entire foreign politics, everything that's going on in Europe and everything that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I'm sure all of you have your opinions. If you're a Trump supporter, you're just like, heck yes, I'm happy that conversation happened. If you hate Trump, you're probably feeling very embarrassed as as a citizen of the United States. And so, for those of you that aren't sure exactly what we're talking about right now, there's a very viral clip going around the internet right now. It's like 4 to 7 minutes, depending on where you watch. And JD Vance, Trump, and Zelensky got into a very heated argument in front of essentially the entire world as they were preparing to go work on the new peace deal and what it meant for the United States with mineral rights. And so it was very publicized that Zelensky was coming to America, that they were going to work out some type of peace deal and figure it all out. And it was going to be really tough and really challenging. And so it bled over in front of the entire world. And it got so bad that Zelensky left the White House. They didn't end up having the next meeting. And I'm pretty sure he left America or was about to leave America. And so I think it's incredibly important to talk about this and try and take it on from an unbiased point, because did we just witness the United States and Ukraine's relationship just fall apart in front of live television? Is this entire thing over with now? And what does that even mean? If you hate Trump, you're saying that he's basically Putin's puppet. If you love Trump, you're like, hey, this is American isolationism. Like, we are back. We are not going to get into any more foreign wars. We're going to care about what's happening in our country. And so I want to dive into that and try and make sense of this, because you're going to see so many things come up on social media, in the comment section, wherever you get your news. And it's honestly just crazy. So before we talk specifically about their conversation, I want to take a step back and look at this from a very strategic standpoint, way back to when the war began. So when Russia first invaded Ukraine, the United States, along with its NATO allies, were right there to help Ukraine after Ukraine, pushed back the first Russian attacks. And it made sense a lot for the United States in helping or being a part of the training of Ukrainian soldiers, giving them hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weapons, because the United States viewed Russia as a threat. And I want to pause right there. So I want to look at this strictly from an American standpoint, not a Ukrainian, not a European, not a specific European country or Russian, just strictly America. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States saw this potentially, I wasn't making a decision, probably saw this as an opportunity to weaken Russia, just like Afghanistan in the 1980s when the Soviet Union invaded and we were, propping up the Mujahideen. It's just kind of what happens with proxy wars when other countries get involved, just like, the Taliban and Al Qaeda were getting support from other countries as well when we were at war for the last 20 years. And so essentially what happened over the last 3 years is that the United States led the war effort in supplying the Ukrainians and training the Ukrainians, whether it was on special pieces of equipment like American-made equipment, or it was just simply just giving them the munitions to fight. And at some point, the United States, and really under President Trump, assessed the situation and was like, okay, I no longer view Russia as a threat that we once viewed them. After 3 years of war, we have essentially decimated the Russian economy with all of the sanctions, with freezing of all their foreign assets in other countries, pulling out Western companies in Russia. Russia was abandoned to the point that they're selling their number one commodity, oil and gas, to India and China for a third of the price. And so, which is pretty much the only way they're staying afloat as a country. And then if you look at it from a military standpoint, Russia has lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers between being killed and wounded, and they have used up so many weapons and bombs and everything else trying to defeat the Ukrainians that I don't want to say they dried up their arsenal, but they took a lot out of it, to the point that they have asked Iran for more weapons, and they're recruiting North Korean soldiers, or asking the North Korean army to send over soldiers because they're low on manpower. And that's not even to mention that there was a revolt between the Wagner Group over a year and a half ago, where they thought about rising up against Putin. They literally took a city and then marched to Moscow and then stopped halfway through because this might be really, really bad. And so I think it's really fair, very unbiased, very objectively, to to say Russia is in a significantly weaker position right now than they were 3 years ago before they invaded Ukraine. And I think that obviously, if you support the West, if you're looking at it that, hey, Russia's been the enemy for at least the last, 80, 100 years from the whole Cold War thing, that this is a good thing. Now, you don't want Russia defeated to the point that they have a revolution, because they still have nukes and that could get really ugly. And you still want some form of stability, regardless of how terrible their leaders have been. And then you can also, I don't want to dive down this rabbit hole, but you can think about it as, hey, if Russia collapses again, China might go up there and take a bunch of land, which could be potentially really, really bad for the United States. So if you're an American and you are thinking through the thought process of, I just want to do what is in the best interest of the United States, no one else, just the United States. And you've pretty much accomplished objective number one, is weaken Russia. Now, if the war ended today, it would take Russia 15, 20 plus years to try and recoup all the losses that they've had. And obviously, a ton of things can happen in that time period. And you probably don't want them to collapse, because that could create even more issues. So if you're in the United States right now and you're looking at how Ukraine unfolded in the entire war, you're probably looking at your European allies. And as I've spoken before on this podcast, I am a huge fan of NATO. I think it's incredibly important. I love NATO. I think it's amazing. And I love Europe. I love our European allies. The cities are amazing. The food's fantastic. The people are great. I could not be more of a supporter. But if I want to look at it objectively, European nations have not met their NATO obligations in meeting the spending limit. And essentially, they've really relied on the United States to take that military load off. And they've also asked the United States to essentially continue to drive the world economy, right? Everyone uses the dollar for, international trading. If you're to compare companies, the United States companies outmatch all of the European ones. And when you really deep dive, it's like, yeah, what does Europe have? They have great wine. They got some good cars. They still have some natural resources up in the Scandinavian countries, but they are not a big world leader in the technology field. I mean, they still have some banks. I want someone to fact check me, but I read somewhere that Home Depot is worth more money than every single European country founded in the last 50 years combined. If that is true, that is absolutely insane. So please, in the comments section, fact check me there. But it kind of just goes to show that America is literally leading the world from an economic standpoint. And so when the United States looks at its European ally, it's like, hey, what have you really done for the war happening in your literal yard? This is incredibly far from the United States, but this is happening in your own yard. We have footed the bill. We've paid the most money. We have donated. I don't know if donated is the right word. We have given, or at least shipped, the most armaments, most vehicles, the most equipment to Ukraine more than any other country. And we're basically saying, like, hey, we've achieved our objectives. This war is essentially a stalemate. Those lines are like World War I lines. They are so dug in. And unless you, I don't know, attack from like Romania or Belarus, which is not going to happen, those lines are not moving. And so what is the point now? People are just dying because of bombing runs and artillery. Nothing's really going to change at this point. It's no longer beneficial to the United States, which is footing the bill and doing the most. So how can the United States get the most out of this? And I didn't know this was a thing until like a week or two ago, but President Trump's like, hey, you guys have like over $500 billion worth of minerals. I know you don't have the money to pay us back. So let our companies come in. We'll take the minerals, we'll use them, and we'll figure out how many minerals we can take so we can call it even. And so there was a lot of pushback against that. But if you're the United States, you have $36 trillion in debt. You have so many different issues. You have essentially saved Ukraine. It probably makes sense that the United States gets something out of this. And yes, I'll give Ukraine all the credit in the world. They repelled the Russian invasion for the first few days and weeks, and they did a phenomenal job, and they deserve all the credit in the world for what they did. But they would not have lasted 3 years without Western support, without the equipment, without the training, without the bombs. It just would not have happened. And so if the United States is saying, hey, we achieved our objective with Russia, Europe's not supporting us, we need something out of this. And so I think that brings us back now to the conversation that happened today. And whoever you want to blame is whatever side you believe in. I'm not going to tell you Trump was right. I'm not going to tell you Zelensky was right. Whoever you support is who you're going to believe. Watch the full, I think it's like 50 minutes long. Watch the full thing yourself. Zelensky says some things that got under Trump's skin, and everyone knows that once Trump is offended or feels threatened or whatever, he's going to push back and he's never going to stop. And so I think the key takeaway here is that regardless of what side you love or what side you hate, is that working in the realm of reality, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Whether you think Trump is the biggest a-hole in the world, he, at the end of the day, the United States is giving Ukraine the ability to continue to fight. And so I would not bite that hand that is giving you the ability to fight. If the United States pulls out right now, I do not think Europe has the means to support Ukraine. And so what does that bring us next? Right? If we pull out from supporting Ukraine, which maybe could happen, we know Trump can, I don't know, do whatever he wants. Does that give Russia the edge that they can go take the rest of Ukraine? I don't think that's really going to happen. I think they're going to, it's basically a leverage to get some form of a peace deal, especially if Trump tomorrow, tonight, the next day, however he works out the process, basically says, hey, on this date, if Ukraine doesn't come to the table and sign a peace deal, we're going to stop giving weapons. I'm sure a peace deal is going to happen or something. But I think what's important to mention that a lot of us aren't really thinking, especially for those that say we need to support Ukraine, we can't let Russia get another single inch, and so on. Historically, the United States does not have a relationship with Ukraine. We weren't really allies. We didn't fight any wars with them. Culturally, there's not like there's a ton. Obviously, Ukrainians immigrated to America, but there's not like an overwhelming amount where it has really created the cultural fabric of America. And don't forget, America was a very isolationist country. And there's so many people I've heard, especially all the anti-war liberals during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, basically saying like, hey, we don't need to fight any more foreign wars, right? And so if you were one of those individuals that not believe in the war in Afghanistan or Iraq, then you probably don't really believe in this war either. Maybe, I don't know. And think about it this way. In World War II and World War I, the United States did not jump right in the war. The Nazis literally took Paris, destroyed the French government, and were doing bombing runs on London. The entire Western civilization as we knew it were about to crumble from the Nazis, and the United States did not get involved. Just remember that. Whenever you think, hey, should the United States be involved in wars? We're supposed to be the policeman of the world, this, that, the other thing. Historically, we weren't for a lot of different reasons, but World War II, we weren't. We didn't do anything until Japan attacked the United States. And then we're like, all right, game on. You attacked us. We're going 100% right now because no one does that. We were going to stay out of business, but you forced our hand. And so when we look at this and we look at, hey, where should the United States focus its attention on? One, we did the podcast earlier today on debt. I'm a huge person that believes that the national debt can destroy the United States of America. And we should make that a priority. We also have issues on our own southern border. We have a ton of domestic issues. We have incredible raising house prices. Eggs are like $10 now, which is like, I know so many people that are anti-Trump are using that as an argument point. And honestly, it's fair game, right? If Trump says he's going to lower grocery bills, you better do it or people are going to take a shot at you. Not literally, just completely figuratively. And then, of course, there's China, which is what I deem or I see as really the only near-peer threat the United States has. And China's building up its military, it's building up everything. And the United States probably really needs to shift its attention over to Southeast Asia and Asia as a whole more than anything else. And let Europe handle European problems. We did that for World War I. We did it essentially everything prior to World War II. And you can be like MR. The United States was nothing in the 18th century. You're like, all right, yeah, that's fair, but point still stands. Prior to like World War I, and we were only involved for like a year or two, we weren't that involved, and we shouldn't. Maybe, and there's an argument saying we shouldn't be involved in Europe. Now, I think any time that there is just absolute injustice and slaughter, and the United States has the means to do something, we probably should. But I can point out to 100 different instances where horrible atrocities are happening throughout the world. I mean, just look up the Uyghur Muslims. We've been talking about that for years and nothing's happening. And why? It's because Because China's too strong to do anything about it. So I want to end with this. One, I think the way that the interaction happened with Trump, J.D. Vance, and Zelensky happening on national TV should never have happened. I don't care. I don't know if they were trying to make a point or trying to show the whole world. It was just so unprofessional. It was just so poorly done. And I don't care what side you believe in or support. I just don't think it should ever have happened. Objectively speaking, the United States has met its objectives by weakening Russia, and now the United States is trying to recoup some of its investment and some of the money it spent. The United States is in so much debt, and there's so many different issues the United States has going on. You can make a strong argument that Europe needs to step up. And again, I believe in Europe. I love Europe. I love NATO, and I do not want to leave our allies hanging in any realm whatsoever. But at some point, European allies need to step up and do the investment that they signed a contract, they signed a treaty, they signed policies saying that they're going to meet the spending limit, they're going to build up their military, and they simply aren't. So there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, and you can rabbit hole whatever way you want, but just think about it this way. There's so much talk about the United States being isolationist again and worrying about our own problems because there are so many domestic issues. And if you keep spending money in foreign places, it's going to be really, really, really freaking hard to get it right back on the home front. All right, turnips. I hope you appreciated this very impromptu episode of the Daily Turnup. Honestly, if this doesn't get more than 50 views, I'll probably just take it down in like 3 days. But if you like it, if you like the impromptu, trying to get directly to what just happened, please leave your thoughts in the comment section. This is going to be very highly debated over the next coming days. Please like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Please like the episode. All the support matters so much to us. And, as always, we just really appreciate the support. And I hope you have a great day.